What do you do when everyone you've ever loved is gone, and the only one left still waits for you at the door every morning? George was 82 when the world went quiet. His wife had passed 5 winters ago. His only son, taken in an accident that still haunted his dreams. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors moved away. Birthdays came and went, unnoticed. He was, by all accounts, alone. But not completely, because Charlie was still there. A shaggy old mutt with cloudy eyes and a heart too big for his chest. He didn't speak, but he understood everything. And in a world that had forgotten George, Charlie remembered every detail. The way George sighed when he missed his wife, the creak in his knees each morning, the quiet tears he wiped away when he thought no one was watching. Charlie saw it all, and he stayed, every single day, at the foot of the bed, by the worn armchair, at the front door, tail wagging, not just out of habit, but hope. This isn't just a story about an old man and his dog. It's about what love looks like when it's all you have left, and how one loyal companion, just one, can hold a broken life together. George hadn't always been alone. There was a time when the house was full of laughter. He remembered the first time he saw her. Marianne, she, had a laugh that made you forget the world was heavy. She worked at the library. He kept checking out books he never planned to read, just to see her smile. They married young, built a life from scratch. Old cars, tiny apartments, burnt dinners, quiet dances in the kitchen. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Their son, Thomas, came 10 years in. George cried the first time he held him. He never told anyone that. But Charlie knew, because Charlie came later, after George retired, after the world slowed down and the house got too quiet. Marianne found the shelter online. Just someone to walk with, she said. Someone to keep you busy. Charlie wasn't the prettiest dog there. He was small, wiry, a little scruffy. But when George knelt down, Charlie didn't bark. He just rested his head on George's knee, like he'd been waiting for him. That was the start. Then life, as it often does, changed again. First, Marianne's cancer. It came fast. Too fast. George watched the light leave her eyes while holding her hand. He didn't speak for days. Charlie didn't either. But he stayed by George's side. Quiet. Still. Present. Then, only a year later, Thomas died. A car accident on the way, home from work. The kind of loss that doesn't just break you, it empties you. George fell apart. He didn't eat. He didn't get out of bed. But Charlie? Charlie would nudge him gently, day after day, bringing him a shoe, a toy, his leash, a reason. Sometimes George would scream. Sometimes he'd cry so hard his hands would shake. Charlie never flinched. He'd just crawl closer, lean in, and stay. Eventually, George started talking again, but not to people, to Charlie. Over breakfast, during walks, in the dead of night when the pain came back. He told Charlie things he'd never told anyone. Regrets, fears, memories that hurt too much to say out loud. And Charlie listened, every time. That's when George realized this wasn't just a dog. This was the last soul on earth who remembered everything with him, who had walked through every storm and never once let go. They weren't just man and dog. They were survivors, and they only had each other. The days had fallen into a quiet rhythm. George didn't expect much anymore. Wake up, feed Charlie, walk slowly through the same streets, say nothing, expect nothing. But one morning, something changed. As they turned the corner, a small voice called out, soft, cheerful, "Hi, puppy." A little girl stood in her front yard, clutching a stuffed bunny. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her name was Emily. Charlie paused, looked at her, then wagged his tail. George gave a small nod, polite but distant. He wasn't used to people noticing him anymore. But the next morning, she was there again. "Hi, puppy." Charlie trotted a little faster that day. Then, the day after that, she waved. Then, she asked his name. Then she asked George's name. And just like that, something cracked open. It started with smiles, then small talk. Then George baked cookies, something he hadn't done in years. He wrapped a few in paper towels and walked them over to Emily's mom. She smiled and said, "Thank you," like it actually meant something. And George felt something stir. He wasn't just walking a dog anymore. He was showing up, being seen. Emily drew Charlie with crayons. George put the picture on his fridge, next to an old photo of his son. It felt strange, but somehow right. Every small moment added up. A warm nod from a neighbor, a child's laughter on a quiet street, fresh cookies cooling on the counter again. But all of it, every bit of it, started with Charlie. He was more than George's dog. He was his. Bridge back to the world, not all at once, not perfectly, but piece by piece, day by day. George was finding his way back because Charlie had never let him drift too far. It happened on a cold morning in January. George had just finished making coffee. He waited, like always, for the sound of paws on the hallway floor. But it never came. He found Charlie still lying in his bed, eyes open, quiet, not quite right. When George called his name, Charlie tried to stand, but whimpered. His back leg shook, then gave out. George's heart dropped. He scooped him up gently, whispering, "It's okay, boy, I've got you." His hands were trembling. The vet's office smelled like antiseptic and fear. George hadn't been there since the day they adopted Charlie. The doctor spoke slowly. Age, joint problems, weakness in the spine. Not an emergency. But not much time left either. George nodded, but the words didn't land. All he could think was, "Please, not yet." That night, he didn't sleep. He laid on the floor beside Charlie's bed, the same way Charlie had once laid beside him, when his world had fallen apart. Now it was George's turn to stay. He ran his fingers through Charlie's fur, told him stories. Old ones, about Marianne's cooking, about Thomas's baseball games, about the time Charlie chased a squirrel and got stuck in a bush. Charlie's eyes flickered, soft and tired. His tail thumped just once. George smiled through tears. There were no big plans now, no walks, no cookies, just the quiet, heavy truth. That time was running out. And still, through the ache in his chest, George whispered, "You're a good boy, the best boy. I'm not going anywhere." Because he knew what was coming, and he knew what it would mean. He had already lost so much. He wasn't ready to lose Charlie, too. George knew the time was close. Too close. The vet had said it might be days. maybe a week. But George could see it in Charlie's eyes. The spark was fading, the light growing softer, so he made a plan, not out of fear, but out of love. "One more good day," he whispered, brushing Charlie's ears. "That's what we'll have." That morning, George dressed slowly. Put on the coat Marianne had once picked out. He wrapped Charlie in a warm blanket and gently lifted him into the car. They were going on one last ride. First stop, the park. Their park. The one where Charlie had learned to chase leaves and bark at ducks. George set him down under the old oak tree. Charlie sniffed the grass, tail wagging faintly. They sat there a while, saying nothing, remembering everything. Then the lake, the one Thomas used to skip rocks across. George carried Charlie down to the water's edge. They watched the ripples dance. George smiled through tears. "Remember how you fell in the first time?" he said. Charlie let out a soft huff, like he did. They stopped by the bakery next, the one where the owner always saved Charlie a little something. She came out with a napkin and tears in her eyes. "Still his favorite," she whispered. Back in the car, Charlie rested, his head on George's leg. The wind was gentle, the sun low. There was one more place to go. The hill, the one George had climbed 50 years ago with shaking hands and a ring in his pocket, where Marianne had said yes, where they'd once laid on a blanket, dreaming of a life that somehow came and went too fast. He carried Charlie to the top. It was harder now. His knees ached, but he didn't stop. When they reached the top, George sat down slowly, cradling Charlie in his lap. The sky turned gold and pink. The world felt still. George looked down at the dog who had saved him. "Thank you," he whispered, "for waiting for me, for walking with me, for never leaving." Charlie looked up, eyes soft, ears twitching at the sound of George's voice. No bark, no whine, just trust. George held him close, heart full, breaking, grateful. They watched the sun disappear behind the eBay trees. Together. One last adventure. One perfect goodbye. That night, the house was quiet. Too quiet. George sat beside Charlie's bed, hand resting on his chest. The fire had gone out, but he didn't move. He just listened. Charlie's breathing was slow, soft then. It stopped. No sound, no struggle, just peace. In the stillness, George closed his eyes, held Charlie closer, and let the silence say what words never could. He didn't cry at first, not because he wasn't hurting. He was, but because something inside him had changed. Charlie hadn't left him empty. He left him full of memories, full of love, full of the kind of quiet strength that only comes from being deeply loved and never forgotten. The next morning, George went to the park, alone, but not really. In his hand, he held Charlie's collar, worn, scratched, familiar. He knelt under their tree, the old oak they had always returned to, and with shaking hands, he placed the collar down, not as a goodbye, but as a promise that love like theirs doesn't end. It lives on, in the breeze, in the leaves, in every step George would take without him. As he sat there, a small hand slipped into his. Emily. Quiet, gentle. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. They just sat together. Two people, different ages, joined by one dog's love. George smiled. Not a big smile, but real. Because even in loss, Charlie had given him one last gift. The courage to stay open, to keep loving, to remember that even when we let go, we still hold on. Time passed. The house stayed quiet, but not heavy anymore. There was still silence, but now it felt like peace. George still talked to Charlie sometimes. When he made coffee, when he walked by the park, when he saw a squirrel dart across the road, the words came soft, natural, like Charlie was still listening. One morning, George went back to the animal shelter, the same one where he had met Charlie all those years ago. Same smell, same faces, same longing in the eyes of every dog behind the glass. He asked if they needed help. Now, every week, George sits on the floor with dogs who've been forgotten. Old ones, gentle ones, the ones people pass by. He doesn't say much. He just lets them lean on him, just like Charlie once did. And something beautiful started happening. He began matching these old dogs with people like him, older folks, lonely hearts, people who needed something soft and loyal to come home to. George became the bridge, the same way Charlie had once been for him. He never tried to replace Charlie. He couldn't. He wouldn't. But he carried Charlie's love forward, shared it, spread it, and in doing so, he was never truly alone again. Some nights, George still walks up to the hill, sits under the stars, talks to the sky, tells Charlie about the dogs he helped that day, about Emily's drawings, about the way life somehow kept going. And sometimes, when the wind moves just right, he swears he hears a tail thump, one soft sound, one reminder that love like that never fades. Sometimes, when the world walks away, one soul stays behind to remind us we're still worth loving. That soul, for George, had 4 legs, soft fur, and a heart that never gave up. Dogs truly are the most loyal companions in our lives. What did you think of this heartwarming story? Let us know in the comments. Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Click here to watch the next story of love, loyalty, and the incredible bond we share with our paw-some friends.